The movie kicks off in a creepy shadowy forest where tall trees block out most of the sunlight, except for a few stubborn rays sneaking through. Suddenly, a dirty hand grabs a tree, and we catch a glimpse of a teenager in a yellow hoodie, sprinting like he's running from his nightmares. He's exhausted and collapses onto the ground, clawing at the muddy earth as he gasps for air. Cut to a red bus driving down a lonely road lined with towering trees. Inside, we meet Nolan, a teenager in a gray hoodie, lost in his music, staring out the window. Nearby, a girl named Bess is sketching in her notebook. Nolan glances at her and smiles shyly, clearly crushing hard. The radio blares news about an upcoming lunar eclipse, and the bus driver, Joe, turns down the volume. He asks the kids if they're excited about the eclipse. Carl, one of the boys, dismissively says he's already seen it on YouTube, while Queenie, sitting next to him, plans to watch it with her dad. They bicker briefly before quieting down. Reggie, a rebellious teen with a nose piercing sitting at the back, crushes an empty can and hurls it at Nolan, hitting him in the head. Nolan turns to see Reggie flipping him off, and they exchange dirty looks. Bess giggles, and Nolan blushes. The group goofs around until Joe asks Bess if she's going to watch the eclipse. Bess seems unsure, and Carl can't resist teasing her and Nolan. Annoyed, Queenie storms to the front of the bus to escape the commotion. As Joe drives on, the bus veers onto a darker, narrower road, hemmed in by dense trees. They soon encounter a fallen tree blocking the path. Rather than turning back, Joe decides to reverse and take a hidden shortcut through the forest, leading them to a fog-covered, desolate road. The mood shifts, and the teens start to feel uneasy. The bus halts again when they come across a dead deer lying in the road, and Joe gets out, warning everyone to stay put as he drags the carcass to the roadside. The kids joke about helping but decide against it. As Joe finishes moving the deer, something catches his attention, and he freezes. Back on the bus, the teens are goofing around when suddenly Joe returns with a gun pointed at his head. The bus goes silent as a disheveled man with wild eyes steps in behind Joe, brandishing a gun. He orders everyone to sit down, and Joe, trying to keep the peace, tells the kids to stay calm. Reggie hesitates but eventually sits, and the man growls at Joe to drive. Carl, staring at the men, suddenly has a flashback. A few days earlier, he was having lunch with his dad Chris, bragging about saving a girl from bullies at school. Chris listens skeptically but lets Carl continue his tall tale. During the conversation, Carl accidentally spills ketchup on his dad's tablet, revealing a news article about an escaped convict. Chris explains the man is a dangerous serial killer obsessed with teenagers. Back in the present, Carl's eyes widen in horror as he realizes the man with the gun is the same criminal. As night falls, the armed man, who we now know as Pedro, orders everyone to toss their phones out the window. The teens obey, but Reggie hesitates, glaring defiantly from the back. Joe pleads with Reggie to comply, but Pedro's patience runs out. He storms down the aisle, shoving the gun against Reggie's head. Reggie, spouting a string of curse words, finally gives up his phone. Pedro sneers, calling the teens zombies and ordering them to sit back and enjoy the ride. The bus lurches forward, carrying the frightened teens deeper into the unknown. As Joe drives deeper into the darkness, signs appear outside warning they've entered an abandoned military zone, definitely not the scenic route. Inside the bus, Nolan and Bess whisper to Carl, suggesting he knock the gun out of Pedro's hand. Carl's face turns pale as he shakes his head, too scared to even think about it. Bess gives it a quick thought but also shakes her head in denial. Just then, Pedro glances back, and they all snap to attention, pretending nothing's up. Pedro looks at Nolan and asks his name. Nolan nervously tells him, and Pedro mocks him, saying it sounds like a comic book character's name. He then goes off on a weird tangent about stealing cigarettes and comics as a kid, revealing a less-than-charming childhood. The bus continues down the road until it reaches a brightly lit tunnel. Suddenly, the engine coughs and dies, leaving everyone stranded in the middle of nowhere. Joe curses, and Pedro, furious, jams the gun against his head, demanding answers. Joe tries to restart the bus, but it's not budging. Annoyed, Pedro grabs Queenie, shoving the gun against her temple, and threatens Joe to fix the bus, or else. Joe gets out, flashlight in hand, trying to figure out what's wrong with the engine. While inside the bus, the teens are losing it, and Carl freaks out, convinced Pedro's going to kill them all. Bess suggests they disarm Pedro, but Carl and Reggie are too terrified to act. Joe, fumbling with the bus engine, admits he can't fix it, but suddenly, the tunnel lights cut out, plunging them into total darkness. The only light comes from inside the bus, and strange noises start echoing from the shadows. Joe points his flashlight into the darkness but sees nothing. Pedro pokes him with the gun, forcing Joe to go check out the creepy noises alone. As Joe ventures into the blackness, the teens watch nervously from the bus windows. Suddenly, a hulking figure rises from the shadows, growling. Joe's eyes widen, and he lets out a scream as the creature grabs him. Panic explodes inside the bus as Pedro yells at everyone to shut up. He looks for the key to restart the bus, only to realize it's not in the ignition. Furious, he points at Carl and orders him to fetch the key off Joe's body. Before Carl can move, Nolan volunteers, but before he can do anything, Bess dashes out of the bus. Pedro aims his gun at Nolan, forcing him to stay put. Bess creeps towards what's left of Joe, reaching into his pocket for the key. She's shaking, crying, and nearly loses it when she hears something move in the darkness. She grabs the flashlight, spots a sudden movement, and bolts back into the bus. Pedro snatches the key from her and commands Reggie to start the bus, but it's still dead. Losing his patience, Pedro threatens to start shooting the teens, beginning with Queenie. Reggie, furious at the insult Pedro threw at Queenie, stands up to defend her. Seizing the moment, Nolan shoves Pedro, allowing Reggie to snatch the gun. Now in control, Reggie aims at Pedro, but Pedro taunts him, claiming Reggie doesn't have the guts to shoot. The tension peaks when something massive slams against the bus, distracting everyone. Pedro regains the gun and, in a panic, jumps off the bus, shouting for the creature to show itself. The beast emerges, and Pedro freezes, staring in shock before getting attacked. The bus erupts in chaos as the teens witness Pedro's body getting dragged by the monstrous figure outside. Everyone huddles together, screaming and crying. But suddenly, the creature's growls echo, and they spot its massive claws embedded in Pedro's lifeless head. Realizing they're on their own, the group frantically tries to figure out how to survive. Reggie, overwhelmed, retreats to his usual spot at the back. As they gather their wits, the radio crackles to life, but it's just static and garbled voices. Suddenly, Reggie, struck by a vertigo attack, stumbles to the back window, pressing his face against the glass before back to his sit. In the next scene, the teens hear that familiar crunching sound. Uh-oh, the creature's back. They huddle together, screaming as the bus starts to shake. Then, long clawed fingers appear, prying the front door open. The kids scream louder, scrambling to the other door as Reggie desperately tries to force it open. Bess grabs the flashlight and shines it at the creature, and to their surprise, it actually works. The monster backs off, giving them just enough time to escape. Bess leads them toward a door she spotted earlier, and they find themselves in a dark, creepy bunker. After some wandering, they discover a small room and decide to hide there. Nolan and Bess find a drawing on the wall. It's a floor plan of some kind of military fortress. They realize they need to find the control tower to turn on the lights, while Reggie doubts they'll find it but tags along anyway. They start talking about Joe, and Reggie reveals that Joe knew his dad, who's currently in prison. Reggie somberly adds that his dad was framed and is innocent. Nolan grabs the map and heads out with Bess, who surprises him by offering to help. Reggie wishes them luck as they set off. On the way, Nolan compliments Bess on her drawings and shares a sweet story about his mom, who was a painter. Back in the safe room, Carl starts making drum noises, listing all the food he wants to eat, but Reggie shushes him, sparking a goofy argument. Queenie interrupts, announcing that she needs to pee, and the boys vote for Reggie to go with her, much to his annoyance. Meanwhile, Nolan and Bess find a huge machine that turns out to be a giant spotlight. Bess points out that the military's plan clearly didn't work, shining her torch toward a cave with a dead body inside. Back with Reggie and Queenie, they wander around, and just before Queenie squats down, she tells Reggie to turn away. Reggie tries to flirt, telling her she looks cute when she's mad and promising to make her mad more often. When she doesn't respond, Reggie calls out, but there's no answer. He finally turns around, only to find Queenie gone. Freaked out, he runs back to the safe room to get Carl. Nolan and Bess, meanwhile, finally locate the main panel. Reggie and Carl sprint through the bunker, shouting Queenie's name until they find her in a dark hallway, screaming under the creature, which is busy snacking on her. In a burst of courage, Reggie charges at the beast, waving a torch to scare it off while Carl pulls Queenie to safety. But the creature swipes the flashlight from Reggie's hand, dousing the fire in a puddle. Back at the panel, Nolan struggles to flip the switch, and Bess jumps in to help. Carl manages to drag Queenie to a safer spot. As they catch their breath, Queenie remembers Reggie, and they rush back for him. They find Reggie on the ground, the creature looming over him, its mouth dripping some mysterious, gross liquid onto his chin. Just as things are about to go from bad to worse, Bess and Nolan finally flip the switch, flooding the hallway with light. The creature screeches and flees, saving Reggie just in time. Carl smiles, realizing Nolan and Bess got the generator working. Back in the control room, Nolan and Bess discover a staircase leading to a cave filled with newspapers and creepy pictures of the creature that killed Joe. They find diaries revealing someone was obsessed with the monster. Nolan picks up a Polaroid of a little girl, piecing together the whole twisted story. As they hurry back to tell the others, they stop suddenly. A shadow is approaching. They hold their breath, but it's just Reggie, Carl, and Queenie, battered but alive. Nolan and Bess rush over to help Queenie, who's hurt. Carl starts babbling incoherently about what happened, but Nolan calms him down as Bess checks Queenie's deep bloody cut. Reggie blames himself for leaving her alone and urges everyone to leave the bunker, but Bess says it's not safe yet. The group heads to the control tower, where they find the body of a ragged old man named Julius. Nolan explains that Julius became obsessed with the creature, which he called the Night Nomad, and shows them to an underground room where he shares the whole story of the man's tragic obsession. After the creature took his sister, Nolan reads aloud from Julius's diary, and the scene shifts to the past. We see young Julius, a little boy in a yellow hoodie, wandering through the forest with his sister, pretending they're on an epic adventure. As Nolan narrates, we watch Julius get distracted, trying to read something, while his sister, unnoticed, wanders toward a tunnel up ahead. The little girl spots something terrifying inside and freezes. Julius finally looks up, but it's too late. A blood-curdling scream echoes from the tunnel. Fear grips him as he backs away, eyes glued to the tunnel. Then, another scream rings out, this time from the creature, and Julius bolts, running as fast as he can. He eventually collapses to his knees, crying in despair. Later, we see him in the back of a police car, clutching his sister's book. The scene shifts to present-day Julius, now a 50-year-old man still haunted by his sister's disappearance. Determined, he ventures into the tunnel, searching for the monster that took her. Surrounded by candles, Julius starts sketching plans for a machine to take down the flesh-eating creature. Back in the present, Nolan and his friends reflect on the story of a desperate man who risked everything to defeat the monster. They brainstorm theories and realize the creature is like a parasite. It won't stop hunting Queenie until it finishes the job. They see Julius's tragic end unfold. Alone in his underground room, his radio accidentally lures the creature to him. The teens decide to stay and finish what Julius started, devising a plan to capture the Night Nomad. Queenie worries about putting her friends in danger, but they reassure her that they're all in this together. After a quick group hug, they spring into action, testing old equipment, mapping out their strategy, and working together to get Julius's light machine running. They stash Queenie in a safe spot and lure the creature into the trap using their bloodied clothes. The plan's working, until Bess can't flip the switch on her own. Chaos ensues when the lights fail, and Reggie's button does nothing. Nolan narrowly avoids the creature, but Bess saves him with a quick distraction. The creature nearly sniffs out Bess and Queenie, who are hiding behind a door, but a distant crash diverts its attention. They finally trick the Night Nomad into a room with Queenie's bloodied clothes under the lights. As the creature grabs the clothes, they flip the switch, blinding it just long enough for Carl to bravely stab it, giving the girls a chance to escape. Queenie and Bess make it out of the tunnel, gasping for breath, and look back to see the creature screaming, unable to leave the darkness. In the distance, the boys charge in, torches blazing, and corner the beast. They reach the Night Nomad, set it ablaze, and watch as it burns to ash. Nolan's voice narrates the end. The answer to Joe's riddle on the bus was courage. He explains how their trial taught them the value of bravery and how, even if no one believes their story, the lesson of courage will stay with them forever. In the final scene, police officers investigate the tunnel. One officer ventures deeper, shining his flashlight into the dark, empty rooms. But suddenly, a loud scream pierces the air. The officer freezes, eyes wide, as his flashlight flickers out. The last thing we hear are his terrified screams echoing through the tunnel. This movie name is Shortcut, which was released on 2020, and got 4.2 rating on IMDb. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hit the like if you truly enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe for more content like this. I'm sure we'll meet again in next video.